On Tuesday the 6th of March 2018, Operation Crimea was released, and with that, not only came the most broken operator to ever release to Rainbow Six Siege, but possibly one of the most broken characters to release in any video game in modern history. This operator needs no introduction, because if you ask any player who played in 2018, they'll tell you Lion was the scariest operator in the entire game. Today we're going to be diving into the backstory of Lion, and how he became so powerful, then fell to complete rock bottom. But throughout time and power creep, he's actually became a pretty good operator. So if you're new around here, please like, subscribe, go follow on Twitch, Twitter and TikTok, all in the description of this video. Without further ado, we'll jump into Operation Crimea, where he first got released. Operation Crimea was a very unique season. This was the first season that we ever got two operators on the same side. And with this, of course, we had Finka and Lion. Lion on release was a 2-speed 2-armor attacker with access to the 417 DMR, the SG-CQB shotgun, and the V308. On release, the V308 had insane ADS time, and also had a 51 round drum mag. Ultimately, this ended up as the go-to for a lot of Lion players at the time. For secondary weapons, he was stuck with the P9 and the revolver, so it came to whatever tickled your pickle. And for secondary gadgets, he had claymores and stun grenades, but let's be real here. You're not here to hear about his weaponry, his secondary weapons, or his secondary gadgets. You're here to talk about his gadget, the Lion Scan. What Lion Scan did was, after a 3-second activation period, you could not move as a defender for 4 seconds. Otherwise, the attackers had complete wall hacks on you. That was the gadget. There was no counterplay, there was nothing you could do. You just couldn't move for 4 seconds. On top of this as well, you had 3 gadget charges, so it was very forgiving. Now what ended up happening off the back of this was a heavy attacker side meta, because all you had to do as Lion was press one button and the defenders were just immobile for 4 seconds. Ultimately at this stage, Lion was so good that a lot of players just didn't play Siege. He was terrorizing the competition, and the amount of highlight reels of Lions walking into the building with the gadget activated and that sharp, quick ADS time of the V308, it was an absolute massacre. But thankfully, Ubisoft knew they needed to nerf this. So, in patch 3.12, Lion finally got some nerfs. The nerfs go as follow. The outline will only appear for the duration of the player's movement, the scan charges were reduced from 3 to 2, and the cooldown between each scan went from 10 to 20 seconds. This meant that now, once you move as a defender, after being scanned, as long as you stop moving, you should be fine again. But the damage would already be done, and the entire attacker side would know where you are. And ultimately, these scan reduction charges didn't last that long, because nowadays in Modern Siege, you have 3 charges set to. Unfortunately, however, this definitely wasn't enough for Lion, and he still saw a high ban rate in ranked and top pro play. So, on the 15th of April 2019, Ubisoft went to rework Lion. Operation Burnt Horizon was a very special season for a lot of players. It came with Gridlock and Mozzie, both operators who do have quite a good and fun history. But the main highlight to a lot of players when looking at these patch notes was this Lion rework. The rework went to only tackle his gadget. They'd done this by creating counters and ultimately just making his ability worse and worse. The balance changes went as followed. Reduced the ability warning to 1.5 seconds from 3, reduced the scanning to 2 seconds from 4, replaced the scan outline by a red ping. This is currently what we have in Modern Siege, where if you move, you get pinged 3 times. Increased the number of charges back up to 3 from 2, reduced the ability cooldown to 15 seconds from 27, and finally some outplay potential with Vigil's ERC7, his main ability. When you use it, you're immune to Lion's ability. This ultimately was the nail in the coffin for overpowered Lion, and nowadays, ultimately, he is a little more balanced. And also with this as well, there was also a massive plummet in his pick rate and his win rate, which, to be honest with you, was good for the game and to be expected. When you have the most broken operator to ever come out in any video game ever, it's amazing to see when they come back to being a normal operator who actually is pretty good and balanced. But this next patch ultimately shapes how Lion is played today in Modern Siege. In Year 4 Season 2, DMRs across the board got a lot of buffs, and with this, one of the main DMRs to get a buff was Lion's DMR, the 417. The 417's damage went from 65 to 70, which on paper doesn't sound that good. However, now this means you can 2-shot 1 armor, 2 armors, and 3-shot 3 armors. On top of this as well, we also saw the recoil getting reduced on the 417 by 19%, and on PlayStation and Xbox to 15%. This ultimately made the 417 a laser beam with no recoil and a high damage fire rate. All it goes down to now was how fast you could click, and at the time, a lot of players couldn't click fast, so it got overlooked. On top of this as well, you can't really blame the community, because at the time, Lion's V308 was insanely powerful, and Twitch's F2 assault rifle is one of the best guns to ever come out on the attacker side. Come Operation Shadow Legacy, we see Lion get no attention at all. The community wasn't playing him, there was no balance changing coming, and everyone seemed to forget about Lion. But maybe that was for a good thing, because he was just insanely broken for the longest. That was until the Heartbeat charges got introduced. Initially, they were actually given to Lion instead of his claymores. Now, in modern Siege, if that was to happen today, that would be a game changer. It would make Lion one of the best operators in the game. However, at this time, the Heartbeat charges were kind of poo-poo. They weren't that good. They took ages to deploy, and ultimately, they were easy to counter. However, after the Heartbeat can openers got buffed to what they are today in Siege, where they're quicker to deploy and they're harder to counter, ultimately, Lion ended up losing his hard breaches. In Year 5 Season 4.3, added claymores removed hard breaches, so they completely reverted any buff that Lion had gotten. In Year 7 Season 3, Lion's pick rate was ultimately one of the lowest in the game. However, his win rate was above average. So, to make Lion more attractive for players to be playing, Ubisoft decided to buff the 417. What they done was, for the 417, was they removed the flash hider, but gave the 417 an angle grip, giving it that snappy ADS time that the V308 had over the 417. However, on the contrary, they did actually give the V308 the 1.5 scope. So now it became more of a coin flip on whether you want to run the V308 or the 417. But finally, the change that cemented Lion as being one of the most powerful operators in the game was giving him access to the Impact EMPs. Impact EMPs in Year 7, and still to this day, dictate a lot of the meta. This is due to the fact that they're ultimately the best way of countering electricity, like bandit batteries and cake claws. So, with Lion having a gadget that can help with the roam clear, and also having a powerful primary with EMPs, it made Lion one of the most underrated operators you could play. At the beginning of 2021, Operation Crim Heist came out with the release of Flores, the border rework, and more importantly, the Gon 6. When the Gon 6 was introduced into Siege, it was gave to Lion and would stay this way for a long period of time. This gave a lot of power to Lion and ultimately helped him stay afloat. Ultimately, Lion EMPs didn't last very long, as with Year 8 Season 4 and the frag grenade rework, he ended up gaining frag grenades with the removal of his Gon 6 and his EMPs. This led to Lion not being the Swiss army knife that came to be expected when you brung him to the attacking side. However, this wasn't the end for Lion. Recently, we've seen Lion get more and more of a pick rate due to more and more players figuring out that Lion has insane killing potential. In modern day Siege, if you run the P9, the 417, frag grenades, and Lion, ultimately, you're going to have an insane kit to frag out with. As long as your fingers can tap fire faster than the enemy's SMGs, you're bound to get some kills. And at events such as SI and Majors and Pro League, this has ended up to become the case with Lion in modern Siege. But that takes us up to today, where this is the current state of him. Right now, he has access to the 417, the V308 and the French shotgun, with the P9 and a revolver, and access to flashbangs, claymores and frag grenades. So if you did enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, go follow my Twitch, Twitter and TikTok, all in the description of this video. And next time you queue up ranked, give Lion a shot. He's a shell of his former self, but that doesn't mean he's bad. Thank you guys for watching, I'll see you later. Goodbye.
Brings back memories for when I was a terrorist, bro.
Okay.